What's up guys, and welcome back to another eBay miniature rescue. Today we're going to take a look at Kharn the Pretty Nice Guy. So a couple of weeks ago, I went onto eBay on my phone and I decided to record the screen. Now the idea behind this is that I wanted to just show kind of naturally finding something pretty cool. And in this case, I found Kharn the Betrayer, the Pretty Nice Guy Betrayer. I thought the listing was pretty great. The guy is obviously a Nurgle fan. All around pretty awesome. So I picked this model up, and the idea is I'm going to strip it clean, repaint the whole thing, put it on a pretty nice base, and I'm going to put this back on eBay for the same price that I purchased it. So I'm going to start an auction, and that way if you want this model and you want to support this channel in a different way, then head over to eBay, check the links in the description, and see what it's all about. Well, overall, this model doesn't look horrible. Now, some of the paint is a little thick, and really I just wanted to start from scratch. So I threw this in my sonic cleaner with LA's Totally Awesome, ran it for a few cycles, and then brushed it off with a toothbrush. And as you can see, it pretty much takes care of the whole thing and cleans up the metal nicely. Then I primed the model with Badger Stino Res Black Primer, and then did a zenithal spray with white ink from the top. So the first thing we're going to do is put some of this Flesh Tearers Red into the airbrush. Now, contrast paints, are kind of hit and miss a lot of the time, but when you put them in an airbrush, they act a lot like inks. So doing this kind of zenithal white ink from the top over that black primer is going to give us a lot of nice gradients and really pump up the volumes where we put more of that white. So when we come back with this contrast paint, it's going to filter over that and give us a pretty nice look right out of the bottle. The first highlight we're going to work with is Mephiston Red. Now this red plays nicely off of this Flesh Tearers, which is more of a corn red color. And I'm going to go down the legs, kind of highlight the center sections of those. I'm going to make sure to hit the face, and I'm going to do a little bit of a gradient on the axe just to give it a little more interest. Our second highlight is a pretty large jump in value. We're going to be using this Wild Rider Red, which really is more of an orange. But because we're putting it over this red, it's going to kind of maintain that hue. It's going to push the red a little bit. We're not trying to get any pink. We're mostly going for orange highlights. I'm also going to use this color to edge highlight a lot of the red armor. And I'm going to try and glaze some of it into some of the highlight points, running down the legs, that kind of thing. I should also mention that I did use a little bit of glaze medium from Liquitex, and that was just to give it a little bit more body so that it was easier to work with. It's still pretty thin, and I've done this lots of times with just straight water, but I do find that the glaze medium works a little bit better and keeps your paint pretty much where you put it, which in turn just gives you a little bit more control over your paint while you're doing this. Now with some Fire Dragon Bright, which is honestly one of my favorite Citadel colors. I'm going to go in and a little bit tighter edge highlight that same armor, kind of go around the inner edges of the armor to give it a little bit more of that fiery look. And I'm going to glaze some of this into those same areas, just in smaller patterns. For the metallics, I'm going to start off with Vallejo Metal Color Copper. If you're new to this channel, or if you've never seen Vallejo Metal Color before, it is some of the most fantastic metallic paint that I've ever used. It goes on extremely smooth, it's airbrush ready, and the metallic sheen that you get is really, really nice. It's nicer than pretty much any other metallic I've ever seen. Coming in with dark aluminum, that's going to take care of all of the silver areas on the model. Now at first it seemed like there weren't too many, but I'd say probably half of the metallics on this model are actually supposed to be silver. Now there's obviously these chains, and that kind of stands out, but there's a whole bunch of pipes and hoses all over this model that look pretty nice in silver. A good example is that there's a whole bunch of this really small trim and a bunch of spikes in this kind of central section of his body. So to give the model a little more contrast and not just to have copper all over, I decided to make that stuff silver. It's pretty unique, it doesn't stand out a whole bunch, but it's a nice difference. So I was going through some of my old paints, and I found a fairly old bottle of black paint that was pretty good. So I transferred that into a dropper bottle, which means that you won't be seeing this anymore. This will be gone. And now, the easy to say and much nicer Chaos Black. Coming in with Chaos Black, I'm going to take care of the tassels on this model. There are a few of them. And then there are a couple of little pipes kind of on the axe and strewn around that look pretty nice in black. So all jokes aside, the color that shall not be named is the same color as Chaos Black. I just happen to have a bottle that I purchased, I don't know, it must have been 10 years ago when I thought maybe I would jump back in, that kind of thing. And I just found it the other day and decided to transfer that into a bottle. Now, the nice thing is it actually is still Chaos Black, but, you know, there's no difference. Alrighty, back to it. So we're going to use Rakarth Flesh. It's a nice base paint, and it covers pretty nicely over even darker colors. And I'm going to use this to fill in the skin of his arm, all of the skulls, and the banding around that axe. The nice thing about Rakarth Flesh in particular is that it's a pretty neutral kind of color. You know, it's not too skin toned, it's not too white. So we can come back with a multitude of washes and kind of tone that to our liking. So with Reikland Flesh Shade, I'm going to take care of the skin on his arm. While that Reikland Flesh Shade is drying, we're going to come in with some Nuln Oil and take care of all of these silver metallics. Something that I find pretty useful with washes in general is that it's a little bit nicer when you just kind of dab them onto the area and then use your brush to kind of push that stuff around. When you just straight brush it on, it kind of settles in weird areas and it doesn't really stick to those recesses. Now coming in with some Agrax Earthshade, I'm going to use this to go over the banding on the axe, and then I'm going to do at least 2 coats on the skulls. That way they're a little bit different, they're darker and a little dirtier. Alright, so we're going to come in with a little bit more Reichland flesh shade. I kind of forgot this step earlier. And we're going to take care of the copper. Now, one of the things that you can do when you're washing copper with, a red flesh shade type wash is to introduce some of the gloss. So you can either put a little bit of gloss medium in there. Vallejo makes a pretty nice, inexpensive bottle. Or you can use the Reichland flesh shade gloss. Now, I wouldn't recommend using the straight gloss. It's a little too much. It kind of looks weird. But if you mix that 50-50 with regular Reichland flesh shade, it gives a pretty nice look and maintains your metallic sheen. Now that that Reichland flesh shade has dried on his arm, we're going to come in with some Druchii Violet. Now I'm going to water this down just a little bit so that it's not too strong, because this color tends to be very strong. And I'm going to put this in kind of the shadowy areas of the arm, anywhere where those veins are popping out, and a good amount around his wrist and forearm where those chains are holding on. Trying to plan a little bit for future steps, I'm going to come in with some of this Vallejo white, and I'm going to put this onto the gun in the recesses for the most part on that barrel, and then on those coils where they're going to be, hot, theoretically. The idea is that we're going to be introducing some glazes over that to color that white and make it look like the gun is glowing, but we really want to make sure that this paint is dry by the time we get to that step. Now that all of our washes have pretty much dried and set up, we're going to start to highlight back up using pretty much all the same colors that we used to put those base coats down. So starting off with Rakarth Flesh, I'm going to start to layer over all of the raised areas that pretty much don't have any shade on them and take care of the arm. Now it's kind of nice because we have this mix of purple and red in the recesses, so you really get that nice bruised look wherever that purple is. And like I said earlier, because Rakarth Flesh is a nice kind of neutral skin tone color, we're going to end up with a pretty nice looking arm that is not quite undead, but not really alive either. To highlight all the metallics, I'm going to put Vallejo Metal Color Aluminum and Copper onto a palette. Not my wet palette, because you really don't want metal flakes in there. Onto a normal palette. And I'm going to mix them together 50-50 to do a majority of the copper. Now, when we get to some of the higher points that, light would be hitting more directly, I'm going to introduce a little bit more of that aluminum, and that's really going to make it shinier and brighter right in those highlight points. So right here, moving on to the leg, I've got a good amount of the aluminum mixed in with that copper, and I'm just hitting the tops of those areas. So right when I finish this, I'm going to kind of twist that, and you can see this left leg versus the right leg, and how that looks kind of running down the leg with those highlights of orange that we did earlier. Now the nice thing about doing metallics like this is that it's not a lot of work. It doesn't change the color very much, but it really reinforces that highlight that's running down that leg. I'm going to take care of all of the pure silver areas with the regular aluminum, and because our Nuln Oil really matted down that shine, I'm just going to try and hit all those high points, and anywhere again where those reflections are going to be a little bit more substantial, where the light's going to be hitting them, and it's really going to make them shine, and it's going to have a nice contrast between the matte black and that shiny silver. I'm going to use Eshin Gray to highlight anything that's black. Now I'm just going to use the side of my brush on all of these tassels to kind of drag that over those hairs, and that's going to pick up all the detail and leave a lot of that black in the recesses. To highlight up those skulls and the wrap on the axe, I'm going to add different amounts of white just to give them slightly different appearances. That way it all doesn't just look like Rakarth Flesh. So for the skulls, I'm just going to add just a touch of white, and that's going to make it look a little bit like Ushabti bone. So, if you have that color, probably better to go for that. I just happen to have this white and Rakarth flesh on my wet palette, so it was easy enough to just grab and mix. And for the wraps on the axe, I'm just going to add a little bit more white, so more of like a 50-50 mix, and that's just going to give us a pretty bright look for those wraps. Oh yeah, and don't forget the fingernails. Coming in with some Citadel's Bloodletter glaze, which, to be honest, is unfairly been discontinued by Games Workshop. Hashtag bring glazes back. I'm going to go over the white that we painted earlier on that gun. Now, I'm going to do a couple different passes of this, making sure that they dry in between, but it's going to give us a nice glowing gun effect. So, a little bit of a story before we get to the reveal. Back in the mid to late 90s when I started playing Warhammer, the friend that I played with used Kharn the Betrayer in every game that we played. Now, we didn't know much about Warhammer at the time, but this model in particular was something to be feared. He would wreck waves of my Guardians, and I don't know if we were even playing properly, but this model always stood out, and it's one of those things that I remember from, getting started and playing early. And I knew as soon as I saw this model on eBay that I was going to have to buy it and paint it. And I hope that someone else can enjoy that and kind of create some awesome stories with it. I know it's not the new Kharn model, but I really enjoy the character of this one, and I hope you do too. Thank you once again for joining me on another eBay miniature rescue. If you liked something about this video, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing, as it really helps out the channel. And don't forget, in the description below will be the link to the auction for this model. I'm going to put this on eBay for 10 days, and the starting price will be the same price that I purchased this model. Once again, I'm Casey, and I will see you in the next video. Hey, welcome back. So this is going to be hopefully an ongoing segment that is targeted to the people who pretty much, frankly, just care more. So thank you for sticking around to the end of the video. This is kind of going to be the place where we can chat, we can kind of go back and forth in the comments afterwards, because you're in a very small group of people who only watch, say, 40-ish% of the video. So what I'm going to do this week is kind of give you, options, right? So I got some Blight Kings. I already started this one a little bit, doing some testing. I'm not sure what I want to do for the armor yet, so if you have any ideas, post those down in the comments. I also have this super funky in pieces. So this is supposed to be a Space Wolf. And I don't know if you can see that, the little tiny head, the cool Space Wolf heads. And I got this from a subscriber. It looks cool, and I think that might be a fun project. So you'll have to let me know which ones you want me to do, which ones first, I should say. I'm going to do both, obviously. But Blight Kings, maybe some color options, and this fancy Space Wolf. So thanks for sticking around. I appreciate all of you, and I will see you later.